Okay. The other thing is this is a webinar format, so you're not going to be able to talk and we can't see you, but we're excited you're here. And we definitely want to hear from you, especially as we go along. If you have questions, be sure to put those in the Q&A section. We'll try to get to as many of those as we possibly can. After this, within the next day or two, usually the next day, we'll send out follow-up information. We'll give you a link to the recording and probably some other information that things that we refer to here, especially some of the legislation, which is pretty pertinent right now. And finally, just make sure if you're not already following us, make sure you're supporting Wild Virginia. We really need you. And for a campaign like this, having as many folks as possible kind of support what we're doing is really valuable. I'll introduce Jackie Goodrum, who's here, and you're going to hear from her doing some presentation in just a minute. And Kaya McClatchy, who basically keeps us on track and make sure we're doing all the right things here. So we welcome you, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Jackie. You can introduce yourself and go ahead and jump in.
Thanks, Dave. My name is Jackie Goodrum. I'm a policy consultant with Wild Virginia, and I have been working with Dave on Wild Virginia's PFAS campaign. And before Dave starts talking about what Wild Virginia is doing to address this problem, I'm going to give a little background on what PFAS is and what we know thus far. So next slide. So recently, it has become public knowledge through scientific study as well as class action lawsuits that our environment has been polluted and continues to be polluted with toxic chemicals known as PFAS. And this pollution is widespread and has contaminated water, soil, air, wildlife, and even our own bodies. Now, PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and they are a class of toxic, as I said, synthetic chemicals that have been used in consumer products and manufacturing since the 1940s. DuPont is credited with creating PFAS with the development of Teflon nonstick cookware and continues to manufacture certain types of PFAS today. 3M is also a major manufacturer of PFAS, as well as Chemours. So PFAS are persistent, bioaccumulative, and mobile. Persistent means that they linger in the environment. They take so long to break down that they have earned the name forever chemicals. You may have heard this, particularly in media coverage of the issue. PFAS are also bioaccumulative, meaning that they build up in the cells of humans and wildlife. And PFAS are mobile, meaning that they move easily through air and water. And this is partly how they just spread in contamination. There are thousands of types of PFAS. EPA has required a phase out of some of these chemicals, including Teflon, after hazards were revealed, but companies have just replaced them with other forms of PFAS. Next slide. So why is PFAS pollution concerning? Why do we care about this issue? Well, we know from current peer-reviewed scientific studies of both humans and animals conducted by academic researchers as well as federal government researchers that PFAS, even at low levels, can have significant harmful impacts on human health. And this is important because PFAS pollution is widespread, which makes it very difficult to avoid exposure. Some of these harmful health impacts include decreased fertility or increased high blood pressure and risk of preeclampsia during pregnancy, developmental effects or delays in children, including lower birth weight and size, as well as behavioral changes, the increased risk of some cancers, including prostate, kidney, and testicular cancers, liver malfunction, hyperthyroidism, colitis, as well as the reduced ability of the body's immune system to fight infections, including a reduced vaccine response. PFAS is also concerning because it can interfere with our body's natural hormones. Some forms of PFAS are endocrine system disruptors. And additionally, some new studies have come out recently that have shown PFAS exacerbating effects or symptoms of COVID-19. And additionally, some of these human health impacts of PFAS are felt by some communities more than others. For example, firefighters, as well as manufacturing workers, are disproportionately exposed to PFAS in greater frequencies and higher quantities due to their jobs. And communities that rely on subsistence fishing also have higher incidences of PFAS-related health impacts, and communities with contaminated drinking water, such as lower income communities or communities in proximity to industrial dischargers, environmental justice type communities, as well as military installations. And it's important to note when discussing health impacts and drinking water that conventional treatment systems do not remove PFAS from drinking water, wastewater, or biosolid sewage sludge. Next slide. So at Wild Virginia, we are also concerned about the health impacts of PFAS on wildlife. And wildlife exposed to PFAS also present negative health effects, including increased incidence of disease, cancers, and lowered reproductive success. And so we at Wild Virginia have adopted this saying that, like DDT, PFAS has the potential to silence the woods and waters by harming wildlife species, by making it more difficult for them to successfully reproduce. Scientific studies have shown that PFAS harms fish, amphibians, reptiles, mollusks, and other aquatic invertebrates. And ultimately, these impacts affect a species' ability to survive. PFAS has been found in fish tissue across all 48 continental states. And PFAS has also been found in animals higher up the food chain that are predator animals that rely on animals lower down the food chain, such as fish, amphibians, mollusks as their prey. And birds are one example of this. There's been a study in Maine where they have found that many seabirds that rely on fish and shellfish for their diet have elevated levels of PFAS. And finally, terrestrial wildlife, so wildlife on land, can be exposed to PFAS and harmed by PFAS through consuming contaminated water or eating contaminated forage, such as crops or wild plants. Next slide. So how does PFAS exposure occur? So there are numerous ways that PFAS exposure occurs. PFAS can be found in many places, including air, water, soil, and food, as well as our homes and our workplaces. And this is why, because PFAS is so prevalent in the environment, this is why we can be exposed and wildlife can be exposed through many pathways. Primary sources of PFAS exposure are ingestion of contaminated drinking water and ingestion of contaminated food, particularly fish and seafood. Other ways that we come into contact with PFAS through food is if our food has been in food packaging that has been coated with PFAS, such as pizza boxes or certain takeout containers. Also, if we're cooking our food and we are using nonstick cookware, that is another source of PFAS and another way that our food is contaminated by PFAS and then gets into our bodies. Also, if we are ingesting food or buying crops or drinking milk or eating meat from animals that have been grown on farm fields where biosolids or sewage sludge has been used as a fertilizer, this is another source of PFAS and another way that PFAS gets into our food systems and then ultimately gets into our bodies. Other pathways of PFAS exposure that have not been studied as extensively yet, but that have also been identified as sources of exposure include inhalation of indoor air. And this is due to off-gassing of PFAS from many consumer products, such as carpet or upholstered furniture that has been treated with Scotchgard, which is a form of PFAS. Dermal or skin contact from using PFAS-containing consumer products, including raincoats, or playing sports on an artificial turf field. PFAS is used in the product in the manufacturing process of that turf. I mentioned a moment ago, there are certain occupations such as firefighting or chemicals manufacturing and processing where workers are exposed to PFAS at higher rates. So that is obviously a pathway of exposure. And I mentioned a few products that we have just around the house that are sources of PFAS, but just to quickly give you a list: nonstick cookware, stain-resistant carpets, upholstery, and fabrics, grease-resistant food wrappers and containers, waterproof outdoor gear, cosmetics, synthetic field turf, Fire and firefighting foam, AFFF, used at airports, military bases, and on naval ships are sources of PFAS and are ways that we, in our everyday lives, can be exposed to PFAS. For WAD Virginia's campaign, we focus on water pollution as a major pathway of exposure because there's a direct connection between contaminated surface waters and contaminated drink water and contaminated farmland, and Dave will discuss this further. Next slide. So how bad is it? Well, the US Geological Survey in fall 2023 released a study of tap water that reported that 45% of drinking water is likely contaminated with one or more types of PFAS. In Virginia, the Virginia Department of Health has conducted limited sampling for PFAS in our public water systems and found that many of those systems contain PFAS. This survey is publicly available on the Virginia Department of Health's website. You can just Google Virginia Department of Health, drinking water, PFAS, and you'll find it. EPA studies have also found contaminated drinking water and groundwater near military bases in Virginia. And there's also been water sampling by citizen groups, for example, around the Chickahominy River watershed downstream from Richmond Airport, that has found PFAS in our surface waters. So what we know with the limited picture that we have is that decades of heavy use of PFAS have resulted in contamination of Virginia's waters, lands, and wildlife. But we do not have the full picture on contamination in Virginia. But with what we do know, there is PFAS here. And now Dave's going to move on to talking about how we address this issue in our state.
Thanks, Jackie. So our campaign that we really announced later last year has three main parts. The regulatory part, which is mostly what I'm going to discuss now, policy and legislation, because although there are tools that are available now, we can definitely improve those through new laws and new approaches, and education, which is necessary to support both of those kinds of efforts. I think it's safe to say that we're just quickly learning a lot every day about this. And we know that a lot of people in the public, a lot of decision makers are really almost at ground zero on understanding it. And so we've all got to catch up. And can't get it to advance. There we go. Whoops. So, Jackie talked about the widespread presence of PFAS in drinking water and coming out of people's taps in different places around the country. And that's a big problem. We're going to have to deal with that. If it's already in a drinking water source, we got to figure out how to deal with it. But the most sensible thing, the most obvious thing is to go back upstream, if you will, and keep that PFAS or those forms of PFAS out of those water sources, whether it's keeping it from going into streams or into the groundwater. The most sensible and the most effective way for us to make progress is to just stop it at the source. And one of the things that I keep reminding people, because when you first start learning about this problem, again, it's everywhere. It's in our bodies, it's in our drinking water, it's in our products. It can be kind of overwhelming, and it's going to take a lot of effort in a lot of different ways to deal with it. It's going to take money. We have to learn a lot more. And as I say, there's certainly going to be some new laws that will be appropriate to deal with it. But the thing I want people to remember is there is something we can do right now. There's authority there that exists that we can push for it to be exercised. And so, I think it's easier to get a little bit dispirited by the magnitude of the problem. But I encourage people not to do that and instead to be focused and excited about the chance we have to do something really good here. And that's the kind of regulatory approach that I mentioned just now. The there are activities that the state of Virginia has permitting authority over, and that the Environmental Protection Agency has oversight of. And specifically, the state of Virginia looks at all kinds of discharges from wastewater plants, from municipal plants, industries, all kinds of facilities. If you're going to have that kind of discharge, then you've got to get a permit from the state, which means you got to figure out what's in that discharge. You have to properly control it to protect the resources and people. The other part is that sludge, which is basically a kind of a solid, semi-solid kind of product that comes out of wastewater treatment plants. A lot of times in thousands of acres across the state, that's getting applied to land, to farmland, pastures, and so on. And since PFAS can be in both of those sources, we need to make sure that when that regulatory review is done, that they're being looked at. And again, the good thing is that we have a role that we're already playing, that you can join us in playing right now. As I say, those discharges can come from municipal plants, whether it's your city wastewater treatment plant, or a community. Sometimes they're owned by HOAs or other smaller entities, but it's essentially home and business type waste. But then for the large wastewater treatment plants, they also will have input from a lot of industries sometimes. Then there are separate discharges where the industries discharge directly to the streams themselves instead of going through that municipal system. And then finally, as I described, there is a whole separate permitting system under which the state allows people to take that sludge, which they call biosolids. Essentially, biosolids is sludge that has been minimally treated for certain things, but not for things like PFAS or other kinds of toxic chemicals. And that gets distributed. A lot of landowners, frankly, are happy to have it because they see it as a useful form of fertilizer, but it also can carry some very, very bad stuff in it. And so it's problematic. So again, what is DEQ responsible for doing? They have the power to do some very, very important things already. And the key, or the kind of emphasis for this program, for this part of our campaign, is to push them to do that, not to do something that is, out of their realm, but to simply live up to the regulations and the statutes that are supposed to guide their actions. If I'm going to discharge to a water body, to the Ravenna River or to some other stream, then I'm supposed to file an application, and DEQ is supposed to figure out what's going to be in my waste stream. I'm supposed to identify what comes into my plant, what kind of treatment I'm going to have. And that's how you figure out how the water body is going to be affected. Once you know what kind of pollutants are there, then you look at whether the conditions in the stream, water quality standards, can be met with that discharge occurring. And if there's a necessity for certain kinds of treatment, certain kinds of operations to remove pollutants or to lessen them, the amount of them, then that's going to be a condition of that permit. And again, those are all things that DEQ does on a daily basis for certain kinds of pollutants, but they have so far essentially refused to address it in relation to PFAS. And we're frankly not going to accept that answer. I'll talk a little bit about that later. The other thing is that, as I say, there's this whole separate program under which Virginia assesses applications for people who want to distribute biosolids or sludge, put it on the land. And they're supposed to look at those same kinds of issues. What's in the material? Where's it going to end up? Is it going to go into streams or groundwater? What kind of crops, what kind of animal exposure will they be? Will there be? What kind of human exposure might there be to that material? So those are just the basics of what DEQ is supposed to be doing. And they're just failing to do it in relation to PFAS. Just a little bit of bureaucracy here. The permitting system, if you're not familiar with it, the permitting system that DEQ operates, it's called the Virginia Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, permitting system. And that's something that they do under state law, but it's also done under the Clean Water Act and through delegation from the Environmental Protection Agency. So they have to meet both state rules and statutes, but also the federal law. And frankly, the Clean Water Act and our state water control law set some pretty high bars that are supposed to be met before these discharges are allowed. Nobody has the right to discharge pollutants into the environment per se without going through these processes and doing it the right and the most protective way. And again, I mentioned water quality standards, just in case you're not really familiar with those. Those lay out several things. They say all these waters should be maintained for maintenance of aquatic life. In other words, they should be sustainable, that the populations of things that are supposed to be living there can live there, that we don't degrade it to an extent that that's a problem. All waters are supposed to be maintained for recreation, which includes, frankly, just the aesthetic value of the waters that people like. It includes public water supplies where we withdraw water from a stream or a reservoir. So it lays out those kinds of uses, and then it says to protect those uses, here are criteria, and they can be numeric criteria, which kind of lays out how much of a specific chemical can be there before we have a problem. They also lay out some kind of narrative descriptions where we don't know those numeric limits the way we would like to, but it still says you got to prevent toxic conditions, you got to prevent problematic impacts on these waters. So that's the framework under which DEQ is supposed to be working. We started, along with some other allies around the state, to look at some of these individual wastewater plant permits some time ago. And I'll give credit to folks like Southern Environmental Law Center, Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League, who started looking at these things also. And a number of us had joined in submitting comments on various permits around the state where we believed that there could be a problem with PFAS. And so that was the first step, to just address some of those and try to see what DEQ was doing, what it would do when we pushed for the changes. We chose, or have chosen, and continue to choose dischargers with certain characteristics. Particularly, we started with a lot of wastewater discharges, bigger municipal plants that had industries that discharged to them. And because EPA and others have identified certain classes of manufacturers, certain classes of industries that may well or almost certainly do have PFAS in some cases, if one of those or more than one of those is contributing its wastewater to the municipal plant, then it makes all the sense in the world that it may well be coming out of that discharge, and that municipal plant needs to figure out what's going on, whether they have it, and what they need to do about it. So the other kind of category of plants, and there are very few right now, but we have several dischargers, several permitted facilities where we actually have data of what comes out their pipe and goes into the stream, what's in their system from different areas, where we know they have PFAS. In some cases, pretty significant amounts of PFAS. And so they're obviously ones that we want to focus on. And then finally, I just threw in the fact that, you know, the unfortunate truth is that an awful lot of the municipal plants are going to have PFAS. The state of Washington has a pretty bold statement right on its website that says it's assumed that pretty much all municipal wastewater plants will have PFAS. And frankly, the studies, the literature seems to back that up. But in any case, we started our focus on ones where we knew there were potentially problematic industries contributing, and the few instances where we know we have PFAS data already. After we started doing those comments to quite a few permits and started getting back essentially a boilerplate answer from DEQ that said, okay, thanks for your comments, but we're not going to do anything. That's my paraphrase, and I think it's pretty accurate. While Virginia decided we wanted to go another step further, that we wanted to really focus more heavily on some specific permits that had the same kind of characteristics that I just mentioned. But we really wanted to ramp up the effort around those specific places and those specific permits. So one of the things we did is, even though DEQ so far has not been requiring facilities or dischargers to go and do sampling, we started learning that some of them were doing it anyway. We also started making information requests from DEQ to try to see if DEQ had more data from some of these discharging facilities. And so we're slowly gathering some of that information, excuse me, which is giving us a better picture of where the real threats or some of the greater threats might be. Since we were dealing with a number of municipal dischargers, which is essentially a public body. They work for the public. They have the intent of serving their customers, of serving the environment. And we don't see them as some kind of bad guys. We want to work with them because we know that they have a difficult job. We want to help figure out how to allow them to discover what's in their systems and then deal with it. And so we've started to reach out to some of those folks. As we're getting into a specific permit process, you know, we start spreading the word pretty widely about what we're doing and how we're doing it. We're not trying to hide anything here. We want people, not only the discharge, the people responsible for the discharge, but everybody in the community to know, hey, here's something we're looking at. Here's something for you to learn about and to be concerned with. And of course, we're seeking allies in the specific areas where these discharges occur, because they're the ones who are going to be the most directly affected. Now, we've started those activities before we even get to an official opportunity to comment to DEQ, because we want to do a real lead up to that process. We don't want it just to be a rote, let's write some comments, submit them, and wait for DEQ. We want it to be more of a process that we create. But once we get to that point of a public notice and a chance for the public to comment, we give people assistance in that. I'm sure some of the folks who are here tonight were probably at our comment writing party, what was it, 2 weeks ago, for the one plant in Roanoke that we've been working on. And you will know that, you know, we're able to give you guides. We're able to give you a lot of insight as to what the issues are, how you can approach them as a person who uses the waters in the area, who lives in the area, and the nuts and bolts of how to do it correctly, where to send it and what to say, so that you get heard. And then finally, Wild Virginia, we always submit our own comments, either individually or in combination with other groups who have a little more maybe background in the legal regulatory systems, sometimes a little more of the technical background, so that we can really focus on some of the important things that not just everybody in the community might have available to them. So I mentioned the Roanoke plant, the first one where we kind of approached it with this more extensive kind of set of strategies was what's called the Roanoke Regional Water Pollution Control Plant. It serves kind of a wide area, Roanoke City, Roanoke County, I think the city of Salem. So there's a lot of customers. It's a big plant, and they take in lots of different kinds of waste. They have quite a few significant industries, along with all the homes and businesses. They discharge to the Roanoke River, and that's really significant because there's already been significant problems with PFAS in the Roanoke area, in the Roanoke River. Upstream from this discharge, the water supply reservoir, one of the big water supply reservoirs for the whole region, withdraws water from the Roanoke River and uses it from that reservoir. And unfortunately, they had a pretty bad case of contamination from PFAS from a source up in the watershed. Now, that wasn't the wastewater authorities or the regional authorities' problem, or it wasn't their fault. But since they also managed that water supply reservoir and the treatment of that, it was all of a sudden a real burden that they had to deal with. And thankfully, they did fairly quickly go and find the source and put in new treatment so that they can deal with that. The other thing is, though, that downstream from Roanoke in Smith Mountain Lake, another water authority, the Bedford County Water Authority, found out that there's PFAS all the way down there. So there was a good reason, besides the fact that this plant takes in waste that probably has PFAS, but the fact that it's already in the environment there. And again, we didn't just, randomly pick permits out of a large list. We just started looking at ones that were coming due for a review in the near future. These VPDS permits in general get reissued every 5 years. And so we just started going down the list and looking for what was coming up 3 to 4 to 5 months ahead of time, so that we could anticipate what was going to be coming. Now, the Roanoke plant permit expires, the current permit expires at the end of January. We have asked for a public hearing, which, if that is granted, then that might be held over a little bit longer, but it'd be worth it to have that extra process. One thing that people probably aren't used to looking at is how much water comes out of these discharges. This facility is currently permitted to discharge as much as 55 million gallons a day. And to put that in context, the Roanoke River at lower flows can be well less than that. So at times, this discharge could essentially be an overwhelming factor in that river. At other times, even then, it's going to be a significant factor. And when you go back to something Jackie said, which is that PFAS is a problem in the environment, even at very, very small amounts. We're talking 4 nanograms per liter is considered right now a number of, did I get that right, Jackie?
Yes, I think so. I was more just Faith was about how small that actually is.
Oh, okay. I was afraid I got that wrong. So yeah, that is, I've seen different demonstrations, or I think it's 1 drop in addition to either a swimming pool or 10 swimming pools or something like that. But the fact is that that's a very, very small amount. And so when you have it in the water body from a big discharge like this, then you have real concerns. So again, let me say that we picked the Roanoke plant for those reasons, not because we know that PFAS is going into the Roanoke River from this source, not because we think the folks who operate this thing are doing something wrong or intentional. What we do believe is that it's necessary for them, for DEQ, to go back upstream and figure out what's coming in their plant. We know because the wastewater authority told us that they don't currently have any data for PFAS on what's coming in their pipes, what's going out to the river, or what's in their sludge. And that's not good enough. We need to start figuring this out now. So, you know, after we've been filing these comments previously, the real answer we got from DEQ, as I mentioned before, is, you know, you say we should be requiring monitoring. We're not doing that. You say we should be looking at sludge. We're not doing that. They don't go to the trouble to address the specific regulatory and legal arguments that we have provided that says why they should be doing these things. They've essentially given us a, you know, we've hit a stone wall with them. And, you know, we keep making the point that, you know, you're going to have to deal with this at some point, sooner rather than later. So why not start right now? The Environmental Protection Agency has given states some guidance through a memorandum that gives them all kinds of recommendations on specific things they could be and should be doing, including how to require monitoring from these sites and what kind of tests should be done. And so far DEQ is just not doing that. So in the process of choosing more facilities, we've looked at a couple more that were a little bit further out in their processing review. The first we started looking at was in Hampton Roads, what's called the Nansemond Wastewater Treatment Plant. Reached out to the wastewater authority folks there and said, do you have any PFAS data? And they said, well, yes, we do, and here it is. So they've been great to start the conversation with them. The fact is that their discharges do have PFAS, and so that kind of raises it, you know, the concern, the priority of looking at it even more closely. That one was scheduled to expire at the end of February, which is why we looked at it in order. We're told now that it's going to be a little bit longer, but if you're in that area or if you're following us, stay tuned because we're going to be kind of ramping up the discussion there. We want all the sunlight to these issues that we can get, and as I say, we've reached out to folks who are running these operations to both get information and let them know we want it to be a back and forth conversation. We want to bring as many of you into the conversation as we possibly can. And that's why we're doing things like this. Now, the other one that I've listed here, a small wastewater plant that's owned by the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority. Essentially, that came onto our list, not because it's a big facility, not because I knew it had any particular industries that might be giving it PFAS, but because I learned that the Ravenna Authority folks had some PFAS data. Again, they're very cooperative. They sent me their data from 4 separate plants in their system. Turned out the Scottsville plant had some of the higher PFAS numbers out of the 4. and it was coming due at the end of March. So that's how we've chosen these places. As I say, we just kind of wrapped up most of the effort on that Roanoke plant, and we're getting ready to kind of ramp up on these others. So for sure, if you're in one of these areas, or if you use water in one of these areas, pay attention. We want your help when we get to those official comments. But these do rise a little bit above all the comments we filed before, because in those cases we didn't have the hard data, and here we do. We're going to continue this. We're not just stopping with these three. We're going to continue looking forward. I've got about 25 on my list that I'm going to reach out to and say, hey, do you have any data? The sad thing is that while these folks have been cooperative in even looking for data or gathering it, DEQ has been totally uncooperative in that effort. I've asked them, do you know of other dischargers around the state that have PFAS data? And again, I'll paraphrase, their answer was, well, there could be some in our files somewhere, but we don't know where it might be. And, you know, essentially, if you want to make a Freedom of Information Act request to officially ask for it, you might have to pay as much as $800 to get an answer. So that's the situation we're looking at. So again, you know, I'm just encouraging you, wherever you happen to be part of this process. You're valuable. You know things about your place, the things you use, the things you care about that are valuable in comments. And everybody has the right to insist to DEQ, hey, do your job. We depend on these laws to protect us. We depend on you to carry them out. And I just included this as that one strategy as far as asking for these public hearings. That's something that doesn't happen on many permits where DEQ actually holds a public hearing. But again, I'm focusing a lot on how we bring people like you into this process. And that's a beautiful one, because first, it can help get more public attention because of the fact that it's a big open forum. And second, it gives folks who are not going to sit down and write comments the chance to show up and say their piece. So I'm now going to turn it over to Jackie again to talk about some policy and legislation. And I feel like I ran a little bit long, but take it away, Jackie.
Thanks, Dave. So another component of Wild Virginia's PFAS campaign is policy and legislation. And in case you didn't know, right now, Virginia's General Assembly is meeting for the next approximately 60 days, a little less now, to write legislation for the coming year. It's called the session, and it started last week on January 10th. So it won't surprise you, most likely after hearing Dave talk about DEQ's inaction, but Virginia is behind other states on the issue of regulating PFAS through legislation. We need to identify and begin to control sources of PFAS pollution in our state. DEQ has existing authority to do this, but the agency is not using it. And so we, along with other allies, are working on educating lawmakers about options that they might have and incorporate into legislation to make something happen. There was minimal legislation in past years on PFAS, some funding for limited water sampling, for example, and the agency action has been limited as well. And I mentioned other states that are ahead of us. West Virginia is one of them. Last year, West Virginia passed the PFAS Protection Act to begin monitoring and controlling sources of PFAS pollution discharges into waters in their state. And Virginia thus far has done nothing on that. Next slide. So one of the reasons that we want to start addressing this problem now is so we can know the extent of the problem and start working on targeting the sources that are discharging pollution into our waters, because it costs more to treat more water after it's been contaminated, particularly to treat it at the drinking water stage. So that's why we want to start identifying and, sorry, identifying sources of discharges into surface waters that then end up contaminating our drinking water. And as Dave noted, EPA released guidance instructing states on how to do this in December 2022. And
I'm
DEQ is
sorry.
not, it's okay, utilizing this authority. So I'm going to talk about a couple bills that have been proposed, and you can look these up on the Virginia Legislative Information Services website. We'll send out that link with the recording of this webinar. There are 4 bills that I want to talk about. One of them is SB 243, HB 1085. These are, yes, thank you. These are put forth by Senator McPike and Delegate Razul. These are identical bills, and they would require reporting of PFAS in wastewater and biosolids. Additionally, there's a bill put forth by Delegate Bulova, HB 245, which would require industrial users to report PFAS use. And finally, there's another bill that I just learned about today from Delegate Campbell, HB 1295, which would require maximum contaminant levels for certain PFAS in all water supplies. So here we see some legislators taking small steps to try to address this issue in our state. How can you get involved? Next slide. And perhaps talk to legislators about these bills or this issue. Well, at the end of the month, Virginia Conservation Network is hosting a couple of lobby days on January 30th and 31st. You can register for them at this website. They will set you up with meetings with lawmakers in Richmond, and you can go and talk with them about PFAS and any other issues that might concern you. Also, if you don't know who your legislator is, you can look them up online, and you can email them, you can call them, you can go visit them in Richmond right now while they're in Richmond for the next couple months, and talk to them about PFAS and other issues that concern you. And this is another way that you can get involved in this issue in Virginia. Next slide. All right.
Okay, sorry about the glitch there. You got to take a quick tour of the whole slide set again.
Okay, they still came up, and we still made it in under the hour. So now we'll take questions. I think we had a few in the chat.
Yeah, can you help us, Kylie? Have you been scanning the questions at all?
Yeah, I have. I can read some of them off to you.
Great.
So one of the questions was, does DEQ have the authority to regulate spread of sludge on farm fields? Localities have a hard time stopping spread by preemption.
DEQ definitely has that authority. There's a special permitting system that specifically looks at that, and they will permit the company that spreads the biosolids or the sludge for a county or 2 or 3 counties sometimes at a time. And that's another permitting opportunity that we're going to be looking at going forward.
And I'll add, this is another area where DEQ has the authority and is choosing not to use it. Whereas in other states, Maine, for example, 2 years ago in 2022, Maine completely banned the spread of sewage sludge on farm fields. And Maryland recently, last year, has suspended its sewage sludge biosolids program while it looks into PFAS issues. So yes, DEQ totally has the authority to regulate this.
And let me just say one thing too, is that we always talk about water quality standards and how streams and lakes are supposed to be preserved. We have some pretty strong groundwater quality standards that frankly almost never get mentioned by DEQ, but they come into play, especially people in the western part of the state where groundwater is so important.
All right, so someone asked if PFAS leak from unlined landfills into groundwater.
Landfills are very definitely a known source of PFAS. Wherever water is leaving those landfills, whether it's going into the groundwater, a lot of the old landfills that are unlined, that are poorly constructed, it very likely is going into groundwater sources. Sometimes it's going directly to streams. And even the better landfills, sometimes they collect the water called leachate, and it's piped to a water treatment plant or a wastewater treatment plant, which then is not equipped to remove PFAS. So yes, the answer is landfills are a big concern, and we probably don't know nearly enough about even where a lot of those things are in Virginia.
All right, so does DEQ have the staff, funds, and leadership to monitor existing permits plus any future permits related to PFAS?
They have the funds, they have the people, they don't have the leadership that is willing to take on this issue the way they're supposed to. Full disclosure, I used to be a permit writer, a supervisor of a permit writing section in DEQ. They do this kind of work all the time, adding PFAS to the list of things they're going to look at when they review a permit application is not a huge task. It means you get data, you assess it, you act on it. So I don't accept any excuse that, oh, we just can't do it, we're overworked. Yes, they're overworked. Yes, they have more than they can rightfully do, but they do permitting every day.
All right, another question we had was, do PFAS have to be included in the Safe Drinking Water Act in order to be targeted?
So
Well,
PFAS,
go ahead, Jackie.
I would say, not quite. So PFAS does not have to be specifically enumerated in the act itself to be targeted, but EPA has proposed a regulation to regulate 6 types of PFAS under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So how EPA is taking this approach is that rather than regulating PFAS as a class, they're doing it on an individual chemical by chemical basis, which is going to take a very long time. And because they're choosing to do it this way, the particular PFAS do have to be enumerated in EPA's regulations to be regulated at the federal level under the Safe Drinking Water Act. But states can, at least right now, and many states actually have, I think Pennsylvania, Rhode Island are a couple examples, have already enacted maximum contaminant levels, drinking water levels statewide because EPA has been slow to act on this.
And I'll hark back to that Roanoke example I mentioned before. It was found in the water supply reservoir. Health Department, DEQ, the local authority, figured out what was there, where it was coming from. And the local authority there has already put in new treatment to remove and reduce the levels of PFAS that's coming to their customers. So it is not necessary to wait for any kind of major new things from the federal government. And a proactive organization like that Water Authority did the right thing without being forced by a new federal law to do it.
So the next question is, once PFAS are found in a water source, what are the options for removing, if any?
If you mean, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, no, you can go ahead, then I'll talk.
Well, if you mean in the drinking water source itself, as I say, there are treatment units that can remove it. Granular activated carbon is one way to remove it from drinking water. I believe there are other sources or other kinds of treatment units, and I won't claim to be an expert on those. There again, we're still trying to figure out how efficient or how effective some of those methods can be. But when you're talking about once it gets into a stream or once it gets into an aquatic environment, that's a whole different picture, because you not only are going to have it in the water, you're probably going to have it in the sediments on the bottom of that stream. You're going to start to accumulate it, as Jackie described, in the animals, in the fish, in the invertebrates. And so once it gets there in significant amounts, we don't have any way to remove it from those environments. And that's why it's so crucial to keep them out of there.
Additionally, if you're adding the treatment technology at the plant, for example, to filter it out of what will become the drinking water, you still have the issue of using granular activated carbon as when those rely on filters. You still have those filters. Those filters have to be disposed of somewhere, and they do have PFAS in them. Another technology that does exist that is not the standard or conventional technology to remove PFAS when you're treating water is reverse osmosis technology. That does work, can also remove it, but again, is not the standard, is not what treatment systems have already. Systems are having to upgrade and add these in, and that costs money. That is expensive. So it can be done, it just costs money to do it.
So I'm seeing one more question in the chat, and the question is, what is happening at the federal level in terms of banning the production and sale of PFAS?
Banning the production and sale, to the extent that I know, as Jackie mentioned, there are some specific kinds of PFAS that have been addressed, but on a wider scale, I can't say that it's a forceful effort. What would you say about that, Jackie?
I actually attended a webinar on this today put on by the Environmental Law Institute. There is several things happening at the federal level relating to the production and sale and manufacture of PFAS, but things are slow. It takes time at the federal level. They are primarily utilizing TSCA, which is the Toxic and Hazardous Waste statute, to regulate and ban production and manufacturing, but they are not all out banning it at this point. That is where that stands. And if you want to learn more about what's happening, EPA has a federal PFAS roadmap that's on their website. And they just at the end of the year came up with their progress report where they talked about individual areas and what they're doing in terms of public health and water and chemical safety and things like that. So things are slowly happening at the federal level.
I just opened the chat since I stopped sharing. I was able to look at it, and I see the question: what happens to the granular activated carbon after it's used? It can go to an incinerator, or it can go to a landfill, and neither one is a great option. I'll be quite honest with you. There are no great options once it gets into the environment. That's part of the reason for such a strong focus on keeping it out. It's not even easy, you know, as I mentioned, for that Roanoke plant, which is 50 million gallons or more a day. That's a huge amount of water to try to treat. And we don't know how effective some of those units would be on treating that wastewater. So again, we go back upstream once more. And those wastewater authorities can go to the industries that contribute water to their plants and say, you have to deal with this problem. There's such a thing as a thing called the pre-treatment program that each of these large authorities operates. So they become the regulator. They can try to keep some of that bad stuff from coming to them. And so it's all about pushing it back up the line. That increases effectiveness and efficiency in the whole process. Did we get to the end of the list? Okay, well, that was almost perfect timing. I'll just say again before we sign off that you will get a follow-up email, everybody who registered tonight, and feel free to share that information with your friends and your neighbors. And keep a lookout, because we want you to jump into some of these permit issues with us and try to make a difference. So thanks everybody for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Any